Got a Sony TCDD8 digital walkman, a DAT walkman, in for service. Let's check it out and see what it's doing. What do we have here? This arrived in the mail today. One of two things that arrived in the mail, but the second thing hasn't been picked up because the guy that mailed it to me, of all the dumb things, put a declared value of $1,400 on a piece of broken equipment. And of course that generated around $250 in taxes, which has got to be paid or it can't be picked up. And I'm certainly not going to pay him. So got to get a hold of the guy and let him know that he's got to pay the taxes. Otherwise he's getting it sent back to him. I had a little DAT machine here. I know nothing about this one. I guess somebody emailed me about the problem they're having. They want me to take a look at this. It's a TCD8. So I'm going to go look at the symptoms and we'll see what the problem with this one is. TCDD8 Sony portable DAT, my favorite units of all times. You can just tell I love working on Sony DATs. I like the Tascam and the TIAC ones. They're not quite as fidgety as these ones, and a little bit easier to work on. But let me look up and see what the problem with this one is, and then we'll get started on it. The complaint on this one is that the door doesn't open. So let's just see what it does. I'm going to put some batteries in it and try turning it on. Open. It doesn't appear to even have power. I wonder if my batteries are any good. You never know, right? Could have dead batteries for all I know. The way that these batteries seem to be behaving these days, you get batteries that are brand new and they got no charge in them. So batteries are good, but this unit does not have any power. Nothing lights up, and when trying to eject, it does nothing. So let's pull the bottom off this unit and see that it's actually getting power. Okay, so here's the bottom off the unit itself. Alright, batteries in. Make sure that we're getting power through to the circuit itself. Oh, there we got power. Okay, so the guides are midway loaded on this unit right now as it sits. The power switch is doing absolutely nothing. Like no attempt to even start the mechanism up to try to unload the mechanism. we unplug the connector for the front panel, we can remove the top cover. Still, this machine should try to go through a power-up cycle. When you first put or connect power to it, it should immediately try to reset itself. And there's nothing. I'm going to lift the circuit board, just see what's under here. Undo the plugs. I got to undo these connections here. Undo the caption motor here, and undo this other clip. The back here, remove that one. This does have a DC to DC converter, and there may be some issues in the power supply here. The DC to DC converter is where I'm thinking there may be some problems, just due to the fact that the unit itself is totally dead. I'm just going to remove the DC to DC converter just to take a look under it. I got the back cover off it, but you can't really see much. Just see the back side of the circuit board. They were problematic on these units. So I'm just going to remove the solder here that holds the DC to DC converter in so I can take it out of the board and inspect it. I do recall that when these were around, that there was a fair number of DC to DC converters were changed on them. There's a good chance that that's what's wrong with this, because it's grabbing the wrong iron. No, because it's completely, like, there's no power. It doesn't attempt to get any power whatsoever. And normally when you press the eject button, even if the mechanism was jammed, it would power up and you'd hear the loading motor. You should hear the loading motor anyway. When you first apply power to it, it should do a self-test. And the loading motor should come on momentarily, or at least try. And this is doing nothing. Like, there's no power whatsoever to this unit. There's a good chance that this is where the fault is this little module here. Because I remember these little modules, 1, 4, 6, 7, 0, 4, 5, 11. That was one that was quite often changed. Got a couple solid capacitors on here. These ones here shouldn't give trouble, but they are Sanyo, so that I mean, that could be the problem too. I'll put the DC to DC converter back in. It only goes in one direction. Just plugs in like this. And soldered down to the board. I'm using the new iron I just got to review. They're actually quite nice, these little irons. They're smart in the fact that they will cool down on their own when you're not using them. And then as soon as you pick them up, they'll go back on to heat up again. I'll take out the other part of the DC to DC converter, this piece. This has got the supercapacitor on it, which is for the backup. And of course it's got the inductor or transformer. It's actually a transformer in this case for the DC to DC converter. Just see if that super cap's got any type of charge in it. It shouldn't, because it's probably been dead for a long time, but anyway, here's a couple of capacitors that are in this circuit here. There's an electrolytic down here and a couple solid caps. We can test that and see what the ESR looks like on this. I definitely think the problem that this unit is having is either this inductor, this transformer here, or the DC to DC converter is where the fault is. More than likely this, because I do recall back when I was in the business getting these things serviced, we used to send these out to Sony. I refused to work on these tiny little devices because warranty work, there was no money in it. They didn't pay us enough to deal with this crap. So my attitude to Sony was, you make this crap, you guys can fix it yourself. So we used to send them out, but I see the invoices come back and DC to DC converters were devices that were changed a lot. So it's very likely that or this that's causing this one to be dead. When I measure the ESR, of course the solid caps are all testing perfect. You know, like what was it down here at? You know, 0.3, 0.2 ohms. This electrolytic here is measuring 4.2 ohms, just a 68 microfarad. at 6 volts. So 4 ohms is probably not bad for this. I don't think that's what's going to cause this unit not to operate. I'll put this back in and we'll do some voltage measurements. I'll put the board back in and we'll just do some voltage measurements and see whether if we get any output from this DC to DC converter. Here we go. Yeah. Let the iron heat up again. One nice thing about these irons is that they heat up very, very quickly. So it's ready to solder in only a few seconds. And then I can either let it go to sleep or I can shut it right down. In this case, I shut it right down. So what I want to do is I want to put the batteries in. I just want to see whether it tries anything. It should try to cycle the mechanism or some part when the batteries go in. But you see, I'm not getting anything. Just see if we're getting any voltages from that DC to DC converter or anything near what we're supposed to be seeing. We should see voltages on the input and the output. See, I'm seeing 6.2 volts on everything. We should be seeing multiple voltages come off of this device. I think I'm going to just throw this one together and let the guy know that it's probably not worth fixing. It sure looks like the DC to DC converter, but there's no service data or anything available for these units. Or I shouldn't say there's no service data, there's no parts available for these units anymore. You know, they were... it's either going to be the DC to DC converter or there's a problem on a crack on the board somewhere, but I'm not getting any voltages coming out of the DC to DC converter. So one has to think that that's probably where the problem is, plus the fact that that was a known issue on these units. A lot of DC to DC converters did fail on these units in the field. I have to do some more research on this. But at this point I'm going to set it aside because it's nothing that's obvious on it that's causing it to not start up. I'm not getting any voltages coming off the DC to DC converter anywhere. Like nothing, no display, nothing attempts to power up. Everything's pointing to that DC to DC converter module, so I'm going to just put this one together and let the guy know that it's likely not going to be repairable, at least not economically repairable. If he could find the DC to DC converter module or even an entire board. Anyway, that's going to do it for this one. We may pick this up again if I can get any info on it.